Well, welcome everybody. Welcome to the Future Trends Forum. We are here live at the EDUCAUSE conference in Anaheim, California. I'm Brian Alexander, your host for today, and we have quite an unusual series of forum events. We're very glad to see everybody here, especially we're glad to see new guests as well as old. Uh, with me right now, actually, why don't you introduce yourself?
Oh, my name is Brian Gardner. I'm Director of Academic Technologies at the Columbia University Business School.
And did you have any snow in DC? I mean, in New York?
No, actually, it only got out of the 80s last week, so I'm very envious of your 4 inches up in Vermont.
We had some snow. I didn't bring any to California, but I am in shock being here.
Mm.
Well, Brian and I are going to begin this series of talks, and the idea is that we're going to be discussing issues pertaining to the future of technology and education, seen through the lens of each guest's experience, including their experience here at the EDUCAUSE conference. So to begin with, if you could just say a sentence or two, tell us about what you do at Columbia.
So I work at the business school with faculty support, academic technology, media services. So basically any of the teaching and learning needs that faculty have for technology, the student experience in the classroom, that's what I do. We also do video production in a broadcast studio.
Do you do, for video production, do you use anything like, what's it called, the one-button studio?
No, we actually have a fully functional video studio because
Oh, wow.
oftentimes faculty or our dean end up going on television, so we can do live broadcasts from there. Plus, we also use that
Nice.
studio to do flipped content, things of that nature.
Oh, great. Oh, must be very busy.
Oh yeah. The guy who runs that is great. His name is Alex Smith, and he's busy wall to wall, but it's all good stuff.
Now, does that live under the IT umbrella, or is that?
Yes. So it lives under the IT umbrella, but it has very strong hook-ins with our marketing and communications department,
sure.
our PR department, essentially.
It must. So in academic computing, a key function of that right now is video. Do you see video demand increasing?
It is, but only in specific formats, because at the Columbia Business School, one of the things that's very important to both the student and the faculty is to have a very tight face-to-face connection.
Right.
Students come to Columbia to connect with the faculty, to connect with a peer network.
So, to be in New York.
Exactly, yeah, to be in New York. But we also have a global network of alumni and friends and whatnot. So video really is a way to bridge the gap and move our value proposition away from the geographical location and maintain that tight, close connection, that very personal experience, but at a distance.
So this is for alumni and also for potential collaborators.
Yeah, so there's there was a professor who's teaching a course on healthcare, global healthcare industries, and we were able to video conference in the CEO of a health firm in China because that was relevant to the topic at the time. And not only were we able to do it, we were able to do it relatively easily, which is the power that video brings in, is that it's not a big heavy lift.
Right. Well, now, yeah.
Yeah. Now that's a very developing story.
Do you find that? Is your video production site also being used for more flipped classroom and producing more content for classes?
It is, though, mostly in an ad hoc basis at this point. Like if there's a professor who says, "Oh, I'm not going to be in town for this. I want to record this lecture," or individual faculty will say, "I want to save some class time, so can I put this lecture together?"
Right.
So we're trying to push that as much as possible, for obvious reasons. But it's very ad hoc. It's not systemic.
So it's not a systemic, say, flipped classroom production sequence.
Correct.
Okay. Oh, that's fascinating. That's fascinating. This is definitely an emerging trend to keep watching.
Yeah, definitely.
And so when you're here at EDUCAUSE at this conference, I'm curious what topics or themes that you've noticed that seem really especially resonant, both for your work and also for the future of education.
Interesting, especially since it's relatively early on in the conference. I think what's most interesting to me are the things that are now kind of assumed. Cloud computing is not really worth talking about anymore, except as what are the specific strategic advantages of this versus that or whatever.
Nice.
So we've really reached a threshold of critical mass of things that have been talked about a lot over the next 10 years. So the question is, what does that pivot into for the next 10 years?
No, that's a good point. So some of these things that were science fictional or were out there are now actually just assumed.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things that I'm interested to see is, we're talking about science fictional stuff. Where will some of that lock in? The 3D printing, what place does that have in technology? And beyond that, the entire idea of a makerspace. You know, I've seen holograms, holography, stuff like that. It's coming along to the point where it's interesting. But am I going to stick if a professor's, overseas, am I going to stick a hologram of him in front of a class, or does that just not make sense?
Well, not yet.
Not, yeah, exactly. But is that a thing? Is that the next iteration of video production, or is the cost and the wow factor just not worth it from a pedagogical standpoint?
Well, that's the question that you have to answer, especially in your role as the head of academic computing for this unit. Do you think? Looking ahead a little further forward, are you seeing VR or augmented reality playing a big role in your school?
I don't think so, only because I haven't seen the technology evolve to the point yet that it would make sense. And looking forward, I just don't know. I haven't been sold on it as an academic tool, given the disciplines that we're talking about. Now, there's certainly potential for it. We were just talking with the Career Management Center a couple of weeks ago. One of our divisions is a marketing team.
The humanities. Generally speaking, we think of languages as humanities. Parts of them are very easily quantifiable. Vocabulary, for example. But maybe one thing that would pan out is that you would see biology, physics, chemistry, computer science becoming more and more automated in a sense, and then the philosophy, history, literature. So you could really see that two cultures divide real scale.
Yeah, and it's interesting to think about in what way that would divide, because maybe with the automation breeds efficiency, and then ultimately that gets pushed down into the K-12 level, so college becomes more about the more esoteric pieces.
Interesting. That might be an interesting way of boosting secondary school attainment and getting students not just to graduate, but also preparing them better for higher education.
Yeah, but throughout the educational ecosystem, creative problem solving is, I think, something, and the ways that applies to all the different disciplines is that will at least be challenging to automate. So I always think that there will be a role for the human element of it.
Well, that's something to explore, and we'll see. But I wonder if problem solving, like critical thinking, is one of those great desiderata that we want from education, and that we can't agree on what it is or how it looks. But in your program, your school has you're not a university, you're a program with a very specific focus. So for you guys, problem solving is actually pretty constrained.
Yes, to within the scope of the discipline.
Right. And so you have you must do a lot of work with case studies, for example.
Yeah, we actually have a department who generates. We can generate our own case studies. We pull from HBR and all kinds of other places.
Oh, I was going to say, I thought you would compete with HBR.
No, well, it depends. I guess we compete and collaborate depending on the circumstance.
Collaborators.
That's what the word I was looking for.
Frenemies.
Yeah, but even in that, there are ways that technology can help. There's a great program that we took a look at called 4Class, which basically you do you do the case study electronically, so you put in all your data, all your responses electronically, but then in the class session, the professor unpacks it, and he or she can really drill down. Okay, what they look for when they do a case study is the best wrong answer. This is the right wrong answer. You made one false assumption, and we can drill into that, and that becomes a real teachable moment. So that's a great blend of online technology, but in class, really unpacking, creating a learning experience, and trying to solve a problem by working through the student responses.
Some have referred to this as, often half-jokingly, kind of cyborg pedagogy, where you have the automated tool that plays a key role in the classroom, but that complements what the instructor is able to do with it. So you quickly identify that.
And I have not heard that term before. It's a little scary just because of the implication of cyborgs, but to some extent, that's what we're talking about.
Well, cyborg we should chill out about. Because so many humans are cyborgs. You think about, what year are you born? 75?
78.
Okay. So yeah, it's your gravitas that led me 3 years early. Sorry. But you think about the amount of people who are right now on various psychopharmaceuticals, which is historically unprecedented. Well, psychopharmaceuticals that work and are not illegal and so on. But that's in a sense we are, that to a degree, slightly cyborg.
I have a good friend who works at another school who basically has a little chip that runs his heart.
Yes, that's a great example. Yeah, without that chip.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and I think that'll continue to develop, especially as prostheses develop. You know, there's been a lot of brain limb interaction work going on there. That the developments are incredible. So yeah, I mean, it's not a scary thing. I was just born and raised on Star Trek and the
I
Wars, so
understand. Well, but also data. Yeah.
that's true. That's
So
true.
if you're a next generation guy, you've got the friendly robot. That's
No, my parents raised me right.
oh, very good, very good. But I'm conscious of time, and I'm conscious that I have a lot of questions I want to ask you. But I think this question of automation, its impact for teaching and learning is a really deep one, and I'm fascinated to see it play a role in school.
Yeah.
One more question I'd like to ask you. One more question to ask you, which is that you're in a fascinating city for technology and education. I mean, New York is crawling with universities, storied and historical ones, and you're part of one of the great ones. And you're also in a field that has a great deal of, or an area that has a great deal of startup action, a lot of technological experimentation. How do you tap the greater New York area for expertise and for inspiration?
Quite honestly, having a brand name helps. You know, inviting people to come and talk at Columbia University to draw. You know, and we actually have a center for entrepreneurship that really specializes in that. We have a facility downtown, which is basically an entrepreneurial startup space where students can apply, and post graduation they can spend 1 to 2 years there, basically founding companies. So we really made it a cornerstone of our curriculum, and people who are interested in that field can see that, and it resonates with them, and they want to join in and be part of it.
Oh, I bet. And New York is well, always trying to make sure it's a leading city for technological innovation. And then that gives you a nice area for drawing staff from. One related question to that. This has come up in Casey Green's campus computing project, which is that a lot of universities and colleges, I think we talked about this yesterday too, are seeing a problem of trying to recruit really good technology staff. Are you finding that issue in New York, or just New York? There's a combination of New York City being very rich in talent and your name being very rich in reputation, good enough to keep staff coming?
No, it's a challenge because New York City is those things, but New York City is also very expensive. So we do okay on cost of living, relatively speaking, but we still have the challenge of being in one of the most expensive places to live on the planet. Not the most, but one of the.
How many of your staff get to work remotely?
It depends on the area. In my team, we're all on site just because we have a very high touch environment, so we need to be there and be available for the faculty and for the clients. But in other areas, there are potentially more remote work arrangements. But so it's an interesting challenge of recruiting talent. One of the things that it is nice is the benefits package we offer includes tuition, programs and things like that. And I think that's one of the greatest tools higher education has to offer potential staff is itself. People will come to Columbia because they want to get a degree from Columbia, and they'll work here. Sometimes they'll stick around for 5 years afterwards. Sometimes they won't. But it really does allow us to bring in people who might not otherwise have been interested.
That's a really good point, as well as their children too.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's a challenge. At some point you have to push the higher calling of higher education. And look at it from an altruistic standpoint.
It's a harder and harder case to make.
Yeah, but
the opposite case is being able to talk with you, because you're replete with ideas and wisdom. I'm so glad that you're able to come.
Well, thank you. I enjoy talking with you always. We were talking before. You're just a walking nexus of trends and look at the environment. So
well,
it's really
that means
enjoyable.
that I should not drink caffeine again. Do you? We have to transition to our next guest, but we'd love to have you back and talk more.
Be happy to.
And thank you once more.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Hope to see you here in Anaheim.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure we'll bump into each other.
Good.
Take care, y'all.